Hey everyone, welcome back to Horse2 Cinema, and today I'm going to be reviewing The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which was directed by somebody, hold on, Tom Gormican. Okay. This is a director who's very, early in his career. I haven't seen or really even heard of anything else he's done, but, let's be real, we're here for this man. As you've probably heard, this is the Nick Cage plays Nick Cage movie. And the premise of the film is that Nick Cage is a successful actor that the industry seems to be moving away from, and it's no longer really in line with what made him love acting. And meanwhile, he also is very estranged from his daughter, and when he gets called to a gig at a birthday party in Mallorca, he finds himself in the middle of a struggle between criminals and the CIA. So I love Nicolas Cage. I think he not only is one of the greatest actors of this generation, but he has a talent that not a lot of people have, which is that he can elevate an otherwise terrible movie into something that's actually quite enjoyable. While he's done some really impressive, serious work, there's a lot of, he's kind of famous for Nick Cage movies, where I'm sure you can think of a lot of them, but he just elevates otherwise really bad material with a crazy over-the-top performance. But despite that I love that part of his career, I really love that in the past few years he started to take a different direction with his movie choices, with films like Mandy and Pig. Stuff where it's still, for the most part, a Nick Cage performance, more so in Mandy than in Pig, but in both films, very serious and kind of elevated material. And so when I saw the trailer for this months ago, I kind of assumed it would be kind of, along that similar line of his career, just sort of a batshit premise that's elevated. The trailer looked absolutely, crazy, but it also looked like something I'd really enjoy. And as the tagline of the movie does suggest, it's the most Nick Cage movie ever made, which is why it's really disappointing to me to say that I didn't really like this movie overall. I'll talk about the good first, because I think that there actually is a pretty decent amount of it, and more so than anything, I think there's a lot of potential in this movie, but it really, overall, it just didn't capitalize on this potential. So starting with the good, Nick Cage is, he's an actor who the world is changing around him. That's a really good premise, and I really like the idea of, the artist is in a changing world that he doesn't recognize anymore. So throughout the film he'll talk a lot about how, a lot of his favorite movies are, kind of like, very like expressionistic classics, a lot from the silent era. He mentions The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari quite a bit. And this kind of corresponds to, like, if you watch interviews with him, he's very passionate about that era of filmmaking, and that's kind of like what inspired him to become an actor. And then if you subsequently watch his movies, you can see how being inspired by that era sort of translates to his filmmaking, because it's not as, like, naturalistic, it's not as realistic as other acting you might see, but it's able to convey expressions in a way that kind of does translate really well to the silent era of movie making. And in this film, it is kind of a commentary on that at times, because it's like audiences don't seem to be responding very well to his films, which is kind of how I'm sure Nick Cage views the world today, with the reaction to a lot of his bad movies. Because if you see him in interviews, all his movies are his babies, even his really bad ones. They just kind of view his performances as, farce, when, they're really not trying to be anything too serious anyway. They're just, conveying expressions. And in the film, his very niche view of, like, performance and the world sort of, it affects not only his career life, but also his family life. Although there's problems with it, which I'll get into, I did like the existence of the arc with his daughter. Cage sort of lets his very niche worldview get in the way of that relationship. So early on, like, she talks about how he just loves to shove like his favorite movies in her face, and he never really considers what she might like, which is not something that I think is only applies to Nick Cage, but I think a lot of people can just relate to that on a very basic level. And where they take how that arc ends at the last scene of the film, where they're sort of watching something of something that she likes together, is really sweet, even though I'll talk about why I don't think the arc is really convincing. Easily the best part of the film for me was the chemistry between Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal. Pascal plays this, like, rich guy who hires Nick Cage to come to his birthday party, and it turns out that he's he might be involved with some of this CIA plot, basically. But they were just they were so funny on screen with each other. You kind of learn that Pascal, his character, has, like, this reputation of, like, this tough crime lord, but very quickly we see that he's just a teddy bear the whole time, and they have a very cute like bromance throughout the film. And of course, Nicolas Cage is great in it. It's, you know, it's a challenging role to play yourself, especially when it's like a constructed version of yourself. It's like how the world views Nick Cage as opposed to maybe how he actually is. But yeah, he's fantastic, and he has a lot of moments that remind me why I really love his performances. There's some really fun stuff in here. But honestly, that's kind of about it. I really like found myself, you know, having a lot of issues with this film. So first of all, it kind of has that Spider-Man No Way Home thing going on where it's doing a lot of cheap fan service, I would say. There's a lot of references to Cage's other films. And although I think there's more self-awareness of those references in this film compared to Spider-Man No Way Home, I still don't think it's executed in a way that's very clean, and it's also just done way too much, to the point where it does become a bit of an eye roll sometimes, I thought. There are, you know, several jokes that I don't think everyone would get, and I think to get all of the jokes in this movie, you probably will have had to seen like most or all of Cage's filmography. There really is a lot. And I like that about it, that the references are sometimes a bit more niche than they would be in Spider-Man No Way Home, where they were just so obvious and so like, you know, hitting you over the head with it. It doesn't feel like they're hitting you over the head with it here always, but I just think it's done a little bit too much. And you know, this movie is also supposed to be like a kind of a meta commentary, like I mentioned with the arc about how he sort of views the entertainment world and how that you know, transitions into the relationship with his daughter. I just think overall the meta aspect wasn't handled that well. It felt very shallow and kind of half-assed in how it was put together. It felt like it wasn't really the primary goal of the film. Though I mentioned I like a lot of the aspects of that arc with his daughter, it did not feel earned for me. You know, obviously you see the daughter early on in the film when they're still at his home in LA, but once he goes to Mallorca, you know, they kind of have to do a very, you know, forced coincidence to get the daughter to Mallorca to be involved in the plot of the rest of the movie. And the reason for why she does show up is quite weak, I would say. But not only is the reason for her being there weak, once she's there, she's really just a device to, you know, for the rest of the plot. There's not a convincing effort to really, you know, for them to really resolve, for Nick Cage and her to really, you know, resolve the issues they have with each other. There's a little bit of a conversation they have around a table, and they try and pretend that it actually does earn that, you know, resolving issues with each other, but it's very brief and therefore very unconvincing. And then, like I said, she just becomes a device for a very cliche action plot, which kind of transition into like the biggest issue with it, which is just, you know, this isn't as much of a, you know, like introspective meta type movie as it's advertised. It's really, a lot of it is just a very generic action movie. It's being marketed as like one of the most original films of the year, but I really, like, I struggled with like the lack of originality. That just really stuck out to me. A lot of even positive reviews that I've read for this film have talked about how the CIA plot is, you know, very, it's one, it's poorly constructed, and two, it's just very overtired, and we've seen this over and over again. I found myself kind of bored during those sequences of the film, especially with, you know, with the side characters, these CIA operatives that Cage is working with, and especially during like the final action sequences. I was very bored, very taken out of it. And I think, like, as I mentioned, it's kind of poorly constructed in being an action movie. You know, a good action movie creates tension in those action sequences because you care about the characters, because it does a really good job of setting those characters up, making them feel, you know, kind of believable. I'm thinking of something like Die Hard or Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's not just that they're doing these crazy stunts and that's the tension, it's that you actually have grown to like, or at the very least care about or be interested in these characters. And there isn't anything like that. I mean, we know, it's almost that the movie is expecting that it's Nicolas Cage, so we just care about him automatically. But the movie hasn't done much to actually make you really invested in it, and certainly not the other characters around him. And I don't know, maybe this is just me, but something about the fact that it was Nicolas Cage, like, playing himself kind of deflated the tension. It's like that idea itself kind of deflated the tension. You know, the fact that it's an A-list celebrity playing himself, and also the fact that the movie has this really goofy tone for it, for a lot of it, which I do like. It's trying to, you know, actually create a sense of danger towards the end of the film, and because of those two things, the fact that it's, you know, he's an A-lister, and the fact that it's goofy, it's like there's no actual expectation that anything bad is going to happen to any of these characters. You never get a sense that they're actually in any danger, which is a real problem when it relies so heavily on those action sequences. And although the movie is funny, It's not like crazy funny. It's not nearly what I was hoping it would be. There was a lot of laughter throughout the theater, you know, from myself included, but there was never anything that like brought the house down. There's never anything that sort of like universally got everyone to laugh. I think a lot of the best jokes are either in the trailer or they're better in the trailer, meaning that in the actual movie they take some of those aspects of the jokes in the trailer and they actually edit them down like that you don't have the full joke that you see in the trailer. Which is odd, because it's almost like it's unfinished. And it just sucks that I feel this way about it, because I really do think that there's a lot of potential here, like I said. Normally with like a mediocre, you know, action comedy, I wouldn't be as harsh in my critique of it. But I think the fact that they had all this meta stuff they wanted to do, and then that wasn't really well constructed, and it's also kind of the background, while this action stuff is the foreground, that kind of just really disappointed me, and I was just thinking the whole time, I was like, come on, movie, I know you can do better. Like, this isn't as good as I want it to be. I think it could have been a really special and intimate self-reflection, and it just relied so much on things that are more cliches. So overall, I think this is the Nick Cage meme movie. And if that's all you want to see, you'll probably have a good time with it. And as much as I love the kind of memeable aspects of Nick Cage and his, you know, crazy movies, there's also something, you know, that's very special about him that I just don't think this movie understands, or at least it doesn't convey it. And, you know, movies like Mandy and Pig, I think, were really able to capture, like, what makes a Nick Cage performance in a Nick Cage movie so special. And I wanted to see, like, a meta piece that understood that, you know, from the marketing of it. It was, you know, marketed as a meta piece, and I really wanted it to delve into that. But unfortunately, I think it was just focused more on the meme than the man, if that makes sense. So I know, like I said, this might seem a bit harsh, but I'm gonna give it 2 stars. I just really wanted a lot more from this. Anyway, that's my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like it down below, and subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more content coming out soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.